Welcome back to Confessions of a Fitness Manager podcast. My name is Staci. This is Jessica with me to speak to you today about the third stage of hiring new talent. So we speak to group fitness instructors, personal trainers, private Pilates teachers, how you're hiring that talent. We've talked through reviewing resumes, so go back to episode 2 for that one. Episode 3 was all about interviews, and today is episode 4, all about auditioning. So as you know, auditioning a group fitness instructor and a personal trainer are going to be quite different. You're looking for different things, you're asking different questions, you're maybe doing it in a different process. So I'm going to speak more to the virtual experience and some past experiences. And then we're going to start off with some stories though first, and Jessica's going to speak to the more in-person and kind of real-time, real-life experiences to give you a lot of things to laugh at and maybe recognize as things you've experienced. And then we'll go into some practical tips and strategies to help you from the audition get as much information as you can and how to deal with applications afterwards if it didn't go so well. So Jessica, tell us your stories.
Oh man, lots of stories. Well, before we get started, Staci, cheers.
Oh
What are we
yeah, I
drinking
forgot.
today?
We're drinking sparkling water over here. How about you?
Oh, that's very exciting. That's slightly more exciting than my ice cold tap water.
Just a little.
Just a little. Well, I wish I was drinking something more exciting to go along with these exciting audition stories. So pour yourself a tasty beverage if you don't have one, because we have some stories. It was hard to pick just a few, so we'll see what we can fit into this short podcast. But I have a couple recent auditions that were hot messes, shall I say. The one that comes to mind was a personal training applicant who, we'll call him Ricky. So Ricky is very experienced in the fitness industry. I came across his resume, and before I even got a chance to give him a call, he actually called me directly at the club, and he asked to speak to the fitness director. And I was just like, okay, like I like that initiative. And we had a great conversation, like a very long phone screen. He had a great personality. He was super enthusiastic, energetic, personable. Like I got off the phone with this guy and I'm like, I want him hired. He's fantastic.
It's awesome.
So yeah, it was great. Like how often does that happen? He just had like a good vibe to him. So I brought him in for his initial interview. Initial interview went great. He answered all the questions correctly. And next step was audition. So a couple days later, we bring him back for his audition. And Staci, that is where it all went downhill with Ricky. So at my club with personal training for their audition, we have two parts. We have a written part and we have a practical application. So the written part, we typically sit them down and we give them a fictitious client. And it's nothing too crazy. Normally it's like, here's Bob, he's 40 years old, works a 9 to 5, really hasn't done very much and wants to get back into shape. Like what are some initial questions you would ask in a consultation with Bob? What are some limitations that Bob may have? And then we asked to go into like a program design. Like we typically ask them to design a cardio portion and a strength portion. Normally, if you're familiar with periodization, we typically ask them to go through like their macro cycle. And then we kind of give them pen and paper and have them design this program. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes 20 minutes. We just kind of let them be. So we leave Ricky to his written part. And before I leave the table to give him some space, because applicants don't really like it when you're like breathing down their neck as they're trying to like design a program. He takes his phone out and he gets on his phone and he's like, his actual words were, don't worry, I'm not Googling the answers. I'm just checking in on like his nephews or something, or his cousins or like something like that. And I'm like, well, that's a really weird thing to say. But I'm like, okay, like if you need to take a phone call or something, like just let me know. But I'll check in with you in a few minutes. And just let him be. And what was interesting was I had another team member, because I didn't want to go back in and be like, is this guy still on his phone? So I had another team member go like walk by and check. And sure enough, the team member comes back and was like, yeah, this guy's just like sitting on his phone texting or doing who knows.
Wow.
He was on his phone when he should have like, So I'm just like, okay, well, that's a little,
Yeah.
red flag.
Mhm.
So after a while, we go in and we check in on Ricky and just kind of see how he's doing. And once he's done, like we walk through the questioning. So so with this fictitious client, what are some things that you want to ask him if his goal is to lose weight? And it took Ricky a very long time to ask the question, how much weight does he want to lose? Because as we know, as fitness professionals, losing 2 pounds or losing 50 pounds is going to be a big change in plan. So we're just kind of going through the practical or the written portion. And when we get to the cardio portion, he's designed whatever the cardio plan was. I don't even remember, but I asked him, like, how can you determine how hard your client is working when they're doing like their HIIT cardio on their HIIT cardio day? And he said, well, I always have my clients wear a heart rate monitor. And I'm like, okay, let's say a heart rate monitor is not available.
Yeah.
How would you determine how hard your client is working? And then he went to, I would have him hold on to the sides of the treadmill. Now, like, that's still a heart rate monitor. That's still a heart rate monitor. What's another tool you can use? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, what about RPE? And he's like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, oh no.
Oh no.
Bad, because especially this is a trainer who has been training in the industry at other clubs and gyms for over 10 years. So that was frightening to me. So then I had to teach him what rate of perceived exertion was. And that was not what I was expecting to do for a veteran in the fitness industry. So there were some other red flags during the written portion, but it was things like that. Like he didn't know some basic things. It very much was just like he had a script and he was just kind of pulling from the script as to how to program design for this client. So done with the written part. So after that, I take him down into the weight room. And while we're going into the weight room, he is behind me on the stairs and he is full on texting on his phone. So it was to the point where I wanted to just like stop him and be like, is this a bad time for you?
Yeah.
Do you need to take a call? Like, I don't know if he thought that I wasn't seeing that, but it was very, very unprofessional. So we go into the weight room and typically, depending on the applicant, I'll start with having them teach a team member 3 basic moves. One of them is a squat, one of them is a lat pull down, and one of them is a deadlift. And then depending on that, we might sprinkle in a few more depending on what comes up. But we typically start with a squat. So I'm like, okay, here is your client. We'll stick with Bob, and he's very deconditioned. Bob has never done a squat before. Teach him how to do a squat. And so he goes over to his squat rack and he puts a bar behind his back. And he, again, is saying the right things. He's saying the right things because it seems like he's memorized a script. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to show you how to do a squat, but I have really tight hips. So I don't know if my squat is going to, like, I don't know how deep I'm going to go on my squat. And I'm like, I'm not judging you on not judging you on how deep you go in your squat. Just like teach Bob how to do a squat. So he has a bar behind his back, and I wish I had a video of this, Stacy. If you think of back in the days of our early 20s when we went to clubs, you know, remember how we would like drop it like it was hot, like drop our hips down and then come up and drop it down and up. This is essentially what Ricky did. He has the bar behind his back. He dropped it all the way down, came up halfway. He went down again. He double bounced at the bottom.
Oh my
and then came back up. He full on like dropped it like it was hot. And I looked at the other team member and I was like, oh no. And
oh my gosh.
I wish I had a video of it. It was brilliant. And I had so much to say at that point, but I'm like, okay, Ricky, so you're trying to
moving on.
Moving on, but I'm like, okay, so you've never taught, Bob has never done a squat before, so you have this bar. How much weight should you put on the bar? And he was just like, it should be no weight. It should be a body weight squat. And then I'm like, then why do you
have the bar?
Right now? So that's what I said in response to that. And then he quickly just put the bar down and then taught a body weight squat. But I'm just like, and we're done here. So that was a very recent personal training applicant who I will not forget.
Yeah,
that was that. I hope you all enjoyed that one. I hope you had a nice drink with that one. But that was a no-go for me.
Unforgettable.
Unforgettable.
That's hilarious. Tell us about a group fitness instructor. What's a more recent experience with a group fitness instructor?
Okay, so I have that too. So I don't oversee our group fitness team. I support the group fitness team because I do teach group fitness classes, and some of my trainers also teach group fitness. So we're lucky enough that we have a small team that I work closely with the group fitness director. So we had an applicant who applied to be a personal trainer. And we brought, she had a phone screen. It was great. We brought her in for an interview. And in the interview, it became very clear that she did not want to be a personal trainer. She wanted to teach group fitness. Where that's one of those things where it's just like, why the heck didn't you say that previously? So, So I passed her information along to the group fitness director. So the group fitness director at that point was just like, let's just bring her in for an interview or for an audition. We asked what she wanted to teach. She said cycling and bar. We'll call her Patty. So Patty wants to teach cycling and bar. And so we said, great. We set up the time. We let her know what to expect. You're going to teach 15 minutes of cycling. We want to see the warm up. We want to see the bike set up. And this is how you're going to teach bar. We have the bar available. We have the mats and we have light weights. And this is what we want to see for bar. We want to see a warm up. We want to see an arm series, and we want to see a thigh series at the bar. So we had, very specific what we wanted to see for cycling and bar. Mm-hmm. And so Patty comes in, and we start in the cycle studio. And I asked her, I'm like, can you show me how to set up my bike? And her whole bike setup was wrong. It was just wrong. So that was the first red flag. And then she starts teaching, and her music is so mellow. It would be stuff that I would be listening to like at a barbecue, like hanging out with my friends. Not, sometimes the music, the playlist kind of sets the tone of the class. Yes, and this was like not a cycle class that I would be excited to take. So it was a very chill, laid back playlist. When she would give cues, her cues either a lot of what she was saying, she would tell us to be at a certain RPM, and it wouldn't make sense. No, mm-hmm. She would have us, she's like, we're doing a hill climb at 100 RPM. And I'm like, what kind of hill is this? It's like, I'm not climbing a hill at 100 RPMs. So it just didn't make sense. She didn't sound excited to be there. She had like no vocal inflections. It was just a very mellow cycle class where what she was saying just didn't make sense. So then we go into the other studio for bar. We set up at the bar, and then she's just like, okay, so I also need a ball, and I need a looped band, and I need a long band. And it's just like, well, a lot of this stuff, like, we don't have prepared for you. We told you we have the bar, we have mats, and we have light weights, and that's what we are prepared to do. And she was like, well, whenever I teach bar, I always use all this equipment. So it wasn't coming off that she was able to adapt. And it was very much the same thing. It was very much very chill music, which depending on what you're doing in bar can be okay, but usually for a warm up, you might want to get them a little bit excited. And I was purposely having incorrect form. And as a bar instructor, I know what proper bar form is. And she couldn't correct my form. She couldn't correct my form. Like when I was doing plies, I would be hinging at the hips, and she wouldn't correct that. So things like that. It was just not a great audition. So I was on the same page with the group fitness director, and he's like, I'm going to pass on her. So he reached out to her and let her know we're not going to move forward at this time. And it was a very professional email that he sent. And her response was to not accept that. So her response was
no.
Her response was, I don't understand what I did wrong. I've never not gotten hired before.
Wow.
So the group fitness director ended up writing back very specific feedback. Like, number one, your bike setup was incorrect. Number two, your RPMs didn't match what you were telling us to do. And then he went into all this detail. And so her response then was to still not accept that. And she actually reached out to the general manager of the club to say that myself and the group fitness director did not hire her, and the general manager needs to hire her instead. So at that point, I don't know why you would want to work for a club who has now turned you down twice. But she still didn't accept that. So she reached out to the upper management and to say, nope, they're wrong and you need to hire me.
So my goodness.
That was a trip in and of itself. Yeah,
Totally
Patty
a
was a trip.
trip. and so challenging. No. And just
It's
to
so
be in those
challenging.
auditions,
Yeah.
yeah, to be in those auditions, it's hard. It's a struggle for everyone, but
And it's,
there are certain personalities that you can groom and
yeah.
improve, but I don't think that was going to happen with our example
No,
of Patty.
yeah, that was just not a good fit. And it's hard with those
Yeah.
auditions when like right off the bat, like it's just
Yeah.
not a good fit because it's like
Hmm.
one of those things as a manager, like you let them continue with the audition and see if
Hmm.
they improve and see if maybe they have something valuable to contribute to the team, or do you just like cut it after like a
Yeah.
minute and say like thanks but no thanks? So that's
Yeah.
a hard one.
It is really hard. I don't know if I've ever stopped an audition before, but there've definitely been times where you and I have looked at each other in auditions and been like, "This isn't going to happen. Not
Nope.
happening. It's definitely not
Nope.
happening." My
What
stories
are some, yeah,
are.
tell us yours.
Oh, I'll tell my stories, but I also
You've
wanted
got
to.
some good ones.
I've got a couple good ones, but I also wanted to emphasize, hopefully people are hearing this and we'll speak to this later in our strategies, but that Jessica, when she describes her auditions that she's setting people up for, she's giving them all of the information they need up front to help them be
Definitely.
successful. And then when they aren't successful, it's even more of okay, it's just not going to happen. It's much more, because you would think you wouldn't want to give them as much information, but by giving them more, then where they're really not going to align with your expectations and what you've expressed to them. The other thing is that she wasn't making it challenging for the applicant to be successful. The example of a client that you gave, your initial personal training example, wasn't anything crazy. Like I've done auditions before as a personal trainer where they were like, all right, it's like a 20 something year old trainer who's my client, who's pretending to be like, they're like, okay, she is a 40-year-old woman who has a high risk pregnancy. And, like, that's like, whoa, like
Yeah.
I'm a young trainer too. Like, don't give me that example. That's really hard. Like, I'm going to do my best, but can I sit at a computer and Google a few things first? Like, that's really tough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's hard because it's like if you can't teach to like a general population client,
yeah.
then I mean, unless you're at like a very special, like a specialized training facility or something, or you're
Hmm.
working in like a doctor's office with pre-postnatal clients
Hmm.
or something like that, then that might be a more appropriate client to give them. But
Hmm.
usually with a health club or now doing like doing a lot with like corporate, like at the fitness
Hmm.
center, corporate businesses or residences, a lot of it is just general population. So
Hmm.
if you can't figure out what to do with just like random Joe Schmo who is
Yeah.
essentially like, I want to lose weight and build muscle, which is like what 90% of the population is,
Hmm.
then you're probably not going to do well with
Hmm.
a more specialized client either.
No, exactly. Yeah. So you get that same information, like you exactly said, without having to feel like you're tricking someone who's auditioning for you. So I love that. My first example is actually a private Pilates teacher. It was an in-person audition, and I was uh, the body, I guess you could say, the person who was supposed to be attending the session. And the fitness manager at the time had asked this person to come in for an audition. And I'm glad I wanted to speak to Pilates audition because those are interesting as well. And if you're a hiring manager for Pilates instructors, you really should know a thing or two about Pilates before you are even auditioning people because it is so unique. The cues they need to say, the education they need to be able to give to their clients as they come in, the exercises that they're teaching, you should at least know the bare minimum. And I did at the time. I was not an expert Pilates teacher or as nearly as close to the level I am now, but I knew a thing or two about it. And this particular instructor showed up and was very obviously not clean. He had walked in like a matching sweatsuit, like a tracksuit, like gray on gray. um, and so, I mean, I'm all for wearing athletic clothing, but like a crew neck sweatshirt with stains on it. His pants had stains on it. Like, I don't know when the last time that outfit had been washed was. And really wasn't listening to me as the client as I was telling him what I wanted to get out of the session, why I was there. He asked the questions, but he definitely didn't listen because then he threw me into the session and was giving me, and this happens in the Pilates space, giving me exercises in a routine and a repertoire that has to happen in that order. And Jessica and I are both on the same page in that you need to be able to cater your session to the client, especially if it's a private session, instead of just throw all these exercises at him or at them. And he was doing the repertoire. And then all of a sudden, when I'd say my hip flexors are bothering me, he would say, well, you need to do this exercise. Like there was no modification or change. It was just like, you have to do this. So I don't, like, not really caring, like, okay, well, keep your legs up. And then he at one point supported my legs. I think he was trying to help me, but he like stood above me and put my legs on his thighs. And it was just so awkward. At the end, the manager at the time who had asked that person to come in for an audition, she was like, I'm so sorry that I did that to you. And it was just really, really awkward and weird. I don't know exactly how his feedback went or what ended up happening after that, but those are some big red flags for applicants if they show up, with like unkept, unable to listen to the client. Those are huge, and have to have this like plan that has to happen is unusual. My next example is a group fitness instructor, and it is an in-person audition. At the time, we had expressed to her, so similar to our virtual interview and phone screen interview and actually in-person interview, feedback for managers is to set expectations. If there's appearance guideline expectations, if there's salary or non-salary expectations, you by this point in the audition, everyone should be on the same page. Like their understanding of what they may need to change or do in order to work for you. You understand that you've given them all the information that they need in order for them to feel happy working with you. This Zumba instructor had said she was this amazing dance instructor. She worked with dance teams. And really, I don't care if a Zumba instructor is a phenomenal dancer. They shouldn't have to be a phenomenal dancer. But that is an indicator that they probably know the beat of the music if they're a dance instructor and they work with drill teams and have all this great experience. Turns out, we got to the audition. It's similar to your example of the bar instructor with mellow music. Music was kind of mellow, which I was so surprised by from like a dance team instructor. You'd think she'd have this like banging playlist that was super up to date and fun. Sure enough, wasn't really on the beat of the music, was close, like very close, but it was very hard to follow because we were all looking at each other like, is it us? Like, is it us that are off? Or is it her? And this particular applicant just happened to have pink hair. And when we had our discussions about her needing to have natural hair color, she said, I'm willing to change that. I would really like to work here. So that was absolutely fine at that point. She came to the audition with it still the way it was, which is okay. But that was kind of interesting. And then after the audition happened, something I do, especially for group fitness instructors, is give them feedback right away and I tell them to expect that after the audition, I'm going to provide you feedback, some constructive, some positive, and we just want to make you better. And we just want to see how we can help you. So they always seemed down for it. And I gave her feedback at the end of the audition that, there were times where we weren't unsure of where the beat was. I wish the music was a little bit more exciting, but her energy and her positivity throughout the class and her eye contact was great. Like I gave her basically that chunk of feedback. There was some constructive followed by positive, and she took it horribly. She was like not having it. She was like, I don't think this is going to work out for me. I'm not changing my hair. Like it all of a sudden became this like huge thing. And people always think that I'm an amazing dance instructor. I work with these dance people and on and on and on and on. So we said, well, thank you so much for showing up today. We'll take you like out the building. And then sure enough, I think either you were following her on social media or someone knew her of social media. She had a bunch of followers. So I think I was actually introduced to her from the marketing team or something because she had all these followers. And sure enough, she had made a post about it on her social media. Like, I showed up at this facility and I did this audition, and then they were discriminatory against my hair and all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? That's the way it goes. I mean, thankfully she didn't like name names or anything. I don't remember her doing that, but it didn't upset me. The whole social media thing didn't upset me. It was just more that how sad is it that someone who has potential, like she really could have been a great instructor, but that feedback piece, if they can't accept feedback, there's something we've talked about before, the ego is just not gonna, it's something you can't change.
Absolutely.
No matter how hard you try. And then my final example is going to be virtually. I mean, we've talked about in person, but what if, and the experience I've had in my new role, what if you have to hire these people, they're halfway across the country and you can't really see them teach in real time? You're not going to ask them to live stream a class to you. Or so my strategy has been to ask for a short, I try to make it as easy as possible, a super short 5 to 10 minute video of them teaching a client if they're a personal trainer or teaching a class. And more recently, I had a gentleman, we did his interview, older, lots of experience. And I kept asking for his video. I was like, we got through a lot of the different onboarding pieces, but I kept having to ask for his video. Can you please send me your video? Can you send it here? Can you send it there? Try to make it really easy for him to submit it, because sometimes the whole like file size thing can be an issue. He eventually got it to me. It was like one of the worst personal training sessions I think I've ever seen in my entire, and I haven't seen a lot of them either. Like, it's not like I have a lot of experience seeing bad training sessions, but the warm up was jumping jacks, which you and I have both agree that that's, I mean, jumping at all really shouldn't be in the first 10 seconds of a session. He was obviously not even able to demonstrate, very similar to your example earlier. He wasn't providing any feedback to the client while it was happening. And I ended up just emailing him and said, thank you for submitting your video, but if this is the best example of you coaching a client, we unfortunately can't move forward with you. Because that's the interesting thing too, is if they're filming a video with a client, like you said earlier, it could be super scripted. It could be it may not even be the best example of how they coach clients or teach classes, because they can rehearse it. They could practice it. They could refilm it. They could, like, it's honestly, it should be their best version of themselves. And so if it's that bad, it's a no. It's a big, big no. So those are my experiences. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what to do for auditions virtually. But I mean, if we were to talk about and like recap some of the biggest vents we have for auditions, I'd start with the fact that, we give them these expectations and there's still like a lack of alignment on that. And then how do you ask or give feedback at the end of the session at all, or end of the audition?
Yeah, I give feedback. And one thing that I like to tell them up front when they come in for the audition is, first, with the written part, we're not necessarily looking for the right answer. We're just looking to see how you can back it up, because my way of training might be different from your way of training, or might be different for whoever's way of training. So I just want to know why they picked that method, why they picked those exercises, whatever it is, and how they can back it up. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll try to question it. Even if I agree with what they've come up with, I want to know why. So there's that. And then in the audition as well, I let them know, we'll talk through it. So I want to know, why are you teaching me to squat with a bar if I've never squatted before? I had another applicant who was great personality. And she was teaching a team member, the body, who's never squatted before, how to squat. She brought out a bench, and she was having them, bring their sit down on the bench and then stand up. But what she was saying was, when you stand up, don't stand all the way up. You still want to stand up with your hips backwards, so you're still in hip flexion. And we couldn't understand why, and we were trying to figure out the why, and we just couldn't connect on that. And so finally, I'm like, we need to move on from this. But what I'm hearing you say is that my full range of motion, or this person's full range of motion when they come up to standing, is still with their hips back and hip flexion. And she said, yes, that is their full range of motion. And I couldn't get on board with that. So I'm just trying to understand their why. I find that to be really important. So I'll let them know right off the bat, like, it's not necessarily the right way. It's just, I want to understand your why, and can you back up your reasoning?
I love that. And I think that's, honestly, if you ask questions, they may share their thought process, and it might educate you too. I think that as managers, we may be auditioning these people, and we may be venting about the experience we've had with these instructors and these trainers, but The annoying part is that their ego is so high that they really feel like what they're doing is absolutely perfect. And even when we ask those questions, they're not able to explain their thought process. So it's not necessarily that we think we know everything and we should just judge these people as they come in to audition with us. But it's like you said, it's kind of scary, some of the things that we see, and we need to be able to. I love that you just ask questions. You're not necessarily sharing like the whole hip thing. She couldn't explain her thought process and you just left it at that. You learned what you needed to learn about the audition. It's not like you needed to like educate her on everything you knew and that she needs to improve on. Like, we're not all about like making these people feel bad. But at the same time, I think your questions are really helpful. And actually, after a group fitness audition, a question I love to ask before I even go into my feedback is, how do you feel like that audition went? And they might say right away, like, I was so nervous. I feel like I was off the beat a little bit. Like, if this applicant, my example was, if she said those things, if she was like, I was so nervous. I don't think it went the greatest. I was off the beat a little bit, but I'll really improve on that. Like, I definitely can be on the beat. I think the sound system's a little different. Like, if she gave me that humbling, like, reasoning behind how the audition went, I probably would have hired her because we could have worked with her on that. But I love that you mentioned like asking those questions and looking for their thought process and their feelings about something. And then something we've talked about as a strategy is group auditions, because sometimes you get lots of applicants for an opening, which is really cool when that happens.
Awesome when that happens.
It's great. It's more rare nowadays, but there were times where Jessica and myself, when we were leading a team, would get multiple applicants and we would just schedule a day and time that worked for most of them or all of them. And to see several instructors teach part of a class and then watch them interact with each other, watch them take the class from another teacher, it's so insightful in their personality. Like, are they going to be able to work with other people? Because people can say all day long, like you and I have explained in their interview, I'm a team player. I work really well with other people. And then you see them in real, like, you see their behavior in real time after you've hired them and you're like, oh, they are not a team player.
Yeah. I mean, group auditions are a great way to see, like, are they going to support other team members or not? Like, are they going to cheer on the instructor who's teaching while they're being a participant? Or are they going to like stand off to the side, like with their arms crossed and like a sour look on their face, you know, because I feel like we've gotten both before, but it's a really good indicator of how well they are going to do with the rest of your team.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. So those are really great. They're also time efficient, and you can have hopefully employees attend an audition, whether it's a personal training audition or a group audition, or just a group fitness audition. Strategies that Jessica and I have used if you need participants, because, you know, teaching a class to one person is awkward. It's very awkward. So hopefully there's multiple people there, but to entice employees to hopefully come to that audition, we would give them gift cards, like small gift cards, could be Starbucks, could be, you know, Amazon, something simple that you can easily email them or give to them in the audition. And then asking them for feedback is super valuable. They might see things you don't notice.
Yeah. And what's one thing that what we used to do at our old club, Staci, is we would invite participants from all different departments. So we would invite group fitness instructors and personal trainers who are pretty athletic and in shape. And then we would also invite people from accounting or membership, or some people who might be a little bit more sedentary. And just it's great to see instructors and trainers teach to different levels and to see if they can adapt, because you might make it a little bit more challenging if you've got a room full of group fitness instructors, because they all know how to find the beat and they all know how to do a proper squat. So that could be really easy to teach. But then if you get someone who sits a lot all day and might be a little bit older or might have an injury or whatever it is, then that's an automatic challenge. I can really see how the instructor or the trainer can adapt to someone on all different levels.
It's so true. And it's funny too, because I remember too, when we would have instructors attend the class, their feedback was so relative to how our team taught. Like, they would give us feedback and they'd be like, I didn't like this because we don't do that in our classes, you know, and And sometimes we had to be like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's just different.
Mhm.
But then
Mhm.
our, other participants who may be from, facility ops or the front desk team, they would say things like, I really enjoyed it because they haven't been to as many classes or they don't know, they haven't taught classes. So their feedback might have been helpful because it wasn't quite comparing to what we had already been offering before. So I think that was quite interesting. And the fact that I lost my train of thought. But getting different departments to meet each other. I loved having, like, that was a hidden value almost, like having accounting show up, and then our group fitness team got to meet people from accounting. And it was this, and before we knew it, half the time our auditions were just the team chatting with each other, like getting excited to see each other, right? We were like, guys, we gotta shut up. Like, time to do the audition now. Like, let's support this possible instructor. So there are a lot of hidden benefits to that group audition. It's more work, but it can be super insightful. Any other strategies or recommendations that we didn't say, Jessica, you can think of?
I'm trying to think. So set them up for success. Let them know what you're looking for. Let them know equipment, what you can provide. With that, I'll also say I think we both faced the challenges of having them bring like a dongle or an adapter for their iPhone because I feel like that's all. I feel like half the time it happens where they show up and they're like, "Oh, I don't have a dongle," and it's like, "Great, neither do we." So,
Yes.
because I know some facilities don't offer that to their instructors because they tend to get lost. So let them know, like, you need to bring your own dongle. It's called the dongle, right?
I think it is. Yeah, it's such a funny name, but it is. Yeah,
We're gonna
that
go with
adapter.
dongle, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that adapter, because it's also I think it's good to see if they actually listen to something like that, because it seems like such like a little trivial piece of knowledge. Like, we don't offer that. You need to bring your own. Let's see if they actually do. Because you don't want someone like running up to their car when they're supposed to start an audition and be like, I need a dongle. So yeah, setting them up for success with what equipment you have, what you expect to see, their warm up, their setup, whatever cues. Invite other people in, different team members, so they can interact and it's not just you and them. I think we hit most of the points. Are we missing anything?
No, I think that's pretty good. I mean, a lot of the same things have come up where it's really like you've mentioned just now, like set those expectations because it will really show you their true colors. We'd love to hear your crazy audition stories. What are some tips that you have for other managers when conducting auditions, whether it's personal trainers, Pilates teachers, and or group fitness instructors? What is it like? What do you do before, during, and after the audition? We'd love to hear all those things. The fourth version, or I guess episode of this series that we've been talking about when it comes to hiring talent, is that final interview. So that final moment where, and it depends on your own process, the final interview I tend to have, if I'm doing more in-person evaluation and hiring someone, is almost like pre-onboarding. Like, you're prepared to hire this person. The audition has gone well. The interview's gone well. The resume review obviously went well. They've made it this far, but it's almost like their last chance and your last chance to say yes or no to make it happen. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how we structure that, how we invite them to that, and the things that we accomplish in that last opportunity to meet with that applicant. And then we'll kind of recap everything that we talked about with the hiring process. And I'm sure hiring is going to come up again in the future because it's still changing and evolving and getting challenging. Yes, we always learn something new. Like, between Jessica and myself, every interview I've done, every audition I've done, I've learned something that I could either improve as an interviewer, or what I've learned is like a red flag to look for earlier on, so we don't have to get to this point and have so many challenges. But we look forward to seeing you in the next episode, or you hearing us and us hearing from you in the next episode. If you choose to watch or absorb this on podcast or YouTube, please like and subscribe this content so we know if you're enjoying it. And again, grab a beverage, join us for episode 5 coming up soon. Thank you so much for listening.